Book 2. Welcome to Jackie's Lyric Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for the first wrap up of 2024. So I read 4 books. One of them was a short story in the 4 Best Midnight collection. And then, well, actually, I think it's considered a novella. And then I DNF'd a book, Russian Blood. I mean, to be fair to the book, maybe if I could have tried again to read it, because I was sick at the time when I was reading it. But it's just, I think I prefer, if that's a reflection of what Russian nonfiction is, then I might prefer Russian fiction over nonfiction. It was hard for me to get into, and I wasn't feeling motivated to pick it up again. And I don't like to leave books just sitting there unless I genuinely, really, really want to read it at some point. Pick it up again and read it at some point. Because I do have a lot of books that I will stop, put it away for a period of time. But that's more of the longer books. Well, in this case, I had no desire whatsoever, and I don't want to leave the book sitting there, especially if it's a book that I know wouldn't take, as far as length, is not that long. Because, it's dense because it's a lot of facts. Like, the author is giving us a lot of information on this family's background. So unfortunately, that was a DNF. And I did put it in my donation pile. Okay, so let's talk about the books I read. First, as you guys know, my goal is to read more Filipino literature, and this is a Filipino classic. And I found out from a relative that I'm in touch with on Instagram that this was required reading in high school, which I thought was really cool and got me excited because, in every country that has the privilege to be able to read literature has their list of required reading books that they have to read, while the other countries that will read them might read those books just for fun, or read them for education purposes. And this one I was reading just for fun. I really enjoyed this book. It does have a bit of a sad ending. I was hoping it wouldn't, that things would work out, but this is a book based on history, so of course it's not gonna work out. It's either gonna have a bittersweet ending situation, or it's gonna be a really tragic ending. And I was having trouble. I thought about doing a separate review for this book, but first of all, I don't have a lot of books to talk to you guys about. And second of all, I was feeling a little overwhelmed and felt like I couldn't really do a really deep dive into talking about this book and giving a really good review for a separate video. Because, I don't know the history. I don't know a lot about the Philippines. I know some things, of course, because of my grandmother. And my dad likes history. He's a history buff. So he lived in the Philippines during his high school years. I mean, that's how he met my mom. So they are high school sweethearts. They're not only high school sweethearts, but they are friends to lovers. So I've always had a soft spot for that trope. Because of my parents. And, so they lived in the Philippines. And my mom, she can understand the language. So, in fact, I meant to ask her to pronounce the translator's name. It totally slipped my mind. Because I do not know how to pronounce the translator's name. Soledad Locsin. Oh, I just realized I should have looked at the name, because when I wrote it in my notes to tell people, comment on videos and wrap-up videos, I totally misspelled her last name. So it's Laxon and Loxon. But I meant to get this correct pronunciation of the translated name so I can give her credit. Soledad Laxon. But anyway, so I feel like I don't have, because I'm only 25% Filipino and was raised in, in America, and I don't know a lot about the history. I didn't even learn the language of Tagalog when I was growing up. So I don't have a strong connection to the events in the book. Not that you can't feel and have empathy and a connection even if you don't, because there are a lot of people who aren't even, don't even have any relation to, have any of this in their DNA at all. And they can still, I imagine, read this and feel the emotion of the story. I would love to have read this in Tagalog. But like I said, I don't know the language. So, and I don't even know if that would really help. But anyway, so this is basically this guy, Ibarra. He has been living abroad in Europe. And he is, well, first, let me explain that at this time in the history of the Philippines, the Spanish had taken over, which is why there's a mixture of Spanish and Chinese in the Philippines. And, so the Spanish had taken over and were running the country, and our main character, I believe, is half Spanish, I think, and half Filipino. I don't remember for sure. I want to say that he is, but maybe he's Spanish, but he just looks at the Philippines as his home country. But, he was living abroad in Europe, and his name is Ibarra, and he finds out, that his father, who was in jail for, what I think is a still unfair reason, had just died while he was in jail. So Ibarra returns, and he wants to connect with the Philippines. He feels like he's been gone for so long, and he barely knows the country anymore, and he wants to reconnect with it and understand its issues and what's going on, and the language and everything. It's very important to him. And he also reconnects with his, for the sake of I'm gonna call him his girlfriend, who he was gonna marry her. Her father is a very important man, and like he's a government official, and Ibarra was gonna marry her, and she had decided to go into the convent because she don't want to marry anyone else. And so he comes back, ready for them to get married, and meanwhile you have the natives, the indigenous people of the Philippines. They are getting tired of how they're treated by the Spanish, and they want to take back their country, their homeland. And so there is a rebellion brewing led by, let me see if I can get the guy's name. I think there are chapters that, introduction to my motherland. There is, oh, not Misa, Sisa. Let me see if I can find, is it Elias? I think Elias, yeah, I think it's Elias. Elias, he is the leader. He had, a long time ago, his father had been killed by one of the Spanish, his grandfather had been killed by one of the Spanish government officials for something, I can't remember why. Like, I think he was his servant, and he didn't, when he didn't like how his servant was doing something. Something like, it was probably something like that. And so he decides, so finally he's taking charge, and he befriends Ibarra, and he wants Ibarra to help them and their cause, because, Ibarra has not been in the country for a long time. And meanwhile, there is another plot where this woman, Sisa, she has two boys, and one of her sons got caught stealing, I believe it was money, and now he's on the run, and her other son is like, we need to stash this money in our home. So the mom is trying to protect her kids. When the police come, she's like, I haven't seen my son, and she is desperate, but she is also desperate to find him. fact, I think this story for me personally is like out of the female, like Siso is the one female character I find really interesting, and I feel such sympathy for. I mean, I do feel sympathy for Ibera's girlfriend. I think her name is Maria Clara, if I'm remembering correctly. I mean, I do, but her character feels a little bland. And maybe it's partly due with the fact that it's a male author, so and I feel like when there's male authors writing, especially when it's the books from, classics, oftentimes the female characters can be a little bland. They're either really, really pure and good, or they're not so good. They're like, and of course, religion plays a really important, crucial role in the Philippines. Like, they are very Catholic, and religion is very important to them. And, like, the government is controlled by, the church. So the padres are very much play a very important role. And Ibera's girlfriend, you find out her godfather is one of the padres, Damasio. And he already did not like Ibera because he didn't like his father, because his father did not do a proper confession, did not confess his sins. So he already does not like Ibera's family and has issues with them, and isn't so keen on Ibera and his goddaughter being together, being a couple. So, so with her character, so I'm also wondering if that played a role in the story, the whole religious aspect, and how the Philippines is very religious. So, of course, the author is religious, probably. Or I should say was, because sadly, he was executed for writing this book along with its sequel. And, so I'm wondering if that was playing a role in the creation of the character and how she's portrayed. So like I said, on the one hand, it was very sweet that she was very loyal to him and was like, I'm going to be in the convent, I'm not going to be with anyone else. But I also wanted her to be a little more complex. I mean, on the one hand, I was like wondering, is she going to, stay loyal to her family or stay loyal to Ibera? But she stayed loyal to Ibera. And on the one hand, that's very sweet and everything, and I'm glad that she didn't get swayed. But at the same time, it's like she's like almost too good of a character. She's too pure and innocent. And like I said, I mean, religion is very important in the Philippines, so maybe they were, the author was saying, she has to be a morally good person, and, follower of God, and, which is not a bad thing. It's obviously good, but sometimes we want more complex characters to get attached to in these kinds of books. But this is an older work of literature, so I feel like, especially the female characters are not always as complex. Sometimes they're very angelic, or they're just very, very naughty. And, so that's why, like, Sisa was a little more interesting to me, because she was a mom, and she was staying loyal to her kids, even though they committed a crime, to, seen through the government's eyes. And, I mean, they stole, so either way, that's still not good. That's still a crime. They stole some money, but she loves her son more than anything. And her story is so heartbreaking, watching her suffer and trying to protect her children, her sons, and she's desperate to find them, and that's such a heartbreaking story in the plot. There are a group of sisters and nuns in the story that I recall being very amused by them and their snarkiness, and they were almost a little giving off gossipy vibes, even though they were nuns. So I found them very entertaining. I also, the book explores not just, the importance of religion in the film, but also, like, how the whole issue of government control, and how certain, how, like, Ibera saw that as a good thing. He found it necessary, and of course he could not begin to understand what Elias went through. He can't see what Elias and the indigenous people of the Philippines suffer. he can't fathom that. And he will never understand. Like, he can feel sympathy for them and try to comfort them, but in the end, he will struggle to see things their way. He doesn't understand their anger and their frustration and their wanting to be free and to make their own choices and not to be treated less than, not to be treated as slaves, basically. So it's interesting, but there's also a bit of respect between Elias and Ymera, and that's really intriguing. I always find those kind of relationships interesting when, two people, you would think they would be enemies, but they are able to look past their differences and still at least respect each other and show friendship, like kindness, and be willing to help each other, even though there can be moments where they're like, I want to kill you, I want to at least beat the crap out of you, because you don't understand how I feel, and you can be insensitive to my feelings. And there is a moment of reveal that kind of, really shakes at their relationship, their friendship that they develop. That, in the book, that comes later in the book. It is in present tense, so that was there when I first started reading. That was a little awkward, the present tense, because I'm not used to reading present tense. I kind of lean more toward, I prefer third person narrative, and most books I think are third person narrative. But I do want to read this again at some point, so I can, especially after I've read more literature about the Philippines. Like, I'm thinking about reading the history of the Philippines after this. This was one of these things where I was just really excited to read this, so I was like, let me pick it up, and it was not a hard read or anything. Like I said, there were some awkward sentences, and there were things that I didn't understand because I don't know the history, and maybe I should have read the history of the Philippines first, at least read that, but I chose not to. And but I am going to read it in February. But the author Jose Rizal does, I don't know if maybe that was the translator or maybe Jose Rizal did it in the book, hoping that people outside the Philippines would read this book, people that didn't know some of the, societal beliefs and rules and all that, like how the Philippines does things, because he does take a moment to explain certain things, like explain, and kind of in a tone that's like, oh, I guess I better explain this to you guys kind of tone, like, it's not important, it's kind of boring, but you'll need to know this stuff kind of tone. That's the impression that I got from those brief moments. But yeah, this was really good, and I would love more people to read this. I think more people should probably read this book if they are interested in learning about the Philippines. But I might recommend learning more about the Philippines, and like reading some history about the Philippines and stuff like that first. Maybe not. Maybe I'm the only one who has this problem, because this is kind of it's kind of more personal for me, because it's, part of my identity in this small way, like, because I am only 25%. But anyway, so that is Noli Me Tangere. I still don't know if I'm saying that right, so that translates to Touch Me Not. And sorry, I cannot pronounce the translator's name. I meant to do that. I honestly did mean to check, but I got sidetracked and was like, and I was also thinking, let me do this now, after I've had my cup of coffee and I have energy to speak, because sometimes I feel like when I film videos in the afternoon, I'm very tired, and my monotone sounding voice comes out even more so. And I sound bored. Maybe I don't, but to me I do. So that's why I wanted to film it now. It slipped my mind to ask my mom if she knew I pronounced the translator's name. But anyway, that's Touch Me Not by Jose Rizal, and translated by Soledad Laxon. Again, I'm probably not saying that right, but what I could do, maybe in the description, I should write that down. and maybe someone else might know how to pronounce the translator's name. So next is Edith Wharton's The Buccaneer. So I've been going back and forth with Edith Wharton and trying to decide if I still want to continue with her. I am a little annoyed at myself for accidentally getting rid of Custom of the Country, unless I left it at my sister's house or something, or my grandmother's house, which I doubt I left it at my grandma's. If I left it somewhere, it's probably my sister's. I mean, of course, watch it show up in one of my bags or something, but, I don't think I ever traveled with the book, because so the only thing I can think of is I must have put in the donation pile, because I kept going back and forth with Edith Wharton if I wanted to continue with her. But this is The Buccaneers by her. And going by the title, I was assuming there were going to be pirates involved and there was going to be a lot of sea travel. And there's not a lot of sea travel. And The Buccaneers refers to the American girls traveling to England and what the English think of them. But anyway, we have the St. George family is our main family, and Nan is our main character, and her mom is concerned because Nan and her older sister are not really being accepted by and welcome into society. Her sister is very much struggling with coming out along with her friends because they represent new money, and coincidentally, Miss St. George hires an English governess, Miss Tess Valley, to come and kind of babysit and tutor and, take care of Nan. And this woman who's, at first Nan's not too keen on it, but she ends up getting attached to Miss Tess Valley and actually really likes her. And Miss Tess Valley feels sympathy for her and her sister and their friends, so she talks to Miss St. George about sending the girls back to England with her to marry some dukes and lords and nobles and knights. And that maybe once that happens, they will all of a sudden get more status living, once they come back to the States. Reluctantly, Miss St. George agrees, and the girls go to England and meet some English gentlemen, some English nobles, and Nan herself cross paths with two guys. Earls. That's the other term, Earls. Let me see. Does it? It does not say it in my. Guy Fawkes. Who his family is not doing very good financially, and in the beginning of the book, he crosses paths with Nan, is immediately drawn to her, but then he knows that he needs to go to, I think it's Africa where he goes, to kind of, get their fortunes back on track. And he does end up meeting and marrying this one woman, but unfortunately she dies, and he is forced to come back home. Now, meanwhile, Nan marries, the other guy she meets is the Duke of Tintagel, who her mom wanted her sister to marry, but then he meets Nan and is immediately intrigued by her. He's fascinated by her because she's so different. And, even though his mom does not like the Americans, is not too keen on this, he wants to marry her. And she is drawn to him because he's handsome, he's a duke, she has these dreams of living, of adventure, and thinks this could be an adventure. And they get married. Unfortunately, things do not go as planned for either one of them. They end up realizing that neither one of them connects really well. He has these expectations for her that she's not fulfilling, and he just does not. He is very cold and distant with her, and she's very frustrated, and he is, always asking his mommy to deal with her, to explain things to her, and he won't, all he wants to do is, work on his clocks. So Nan is not, she's miserable in her marriage, but her sister and her friends are telling her, you gotta stick with us. Why wouldn't you want to stay with the handsome Duke? And, you know, you got to stay in this marriage, and you can just have a fling with someone else, have an affair. And Nan starts questioning her decisions. So, like it said, it's not exactly what I thought it was going to be, going by the title. But I shouldn't known. Because Eastward seems to explore a lot of the same themes, like the struggles of women, particularly in marriage, and how we didn't have a lot of choice back then. And sometimes we would end up in a loveless marriage. And actually, Emma from Bookish Princess put it perfectly why I struggle with Edith Wharton, even though I love her writing and her characters are good and interesting, and the stories, I do somewhat like the stories, but that she focuses more on despair than like someone like Jane Austen, who gives her characters happy endings. And maybe that's not realistic, but I kind of want hopeful endings. Now, all I'm going to say for the ending of this is that, granted, it was not written by Edith Wharton, because sadly Edith Wharton passed away before she could finish it, is that this ending has a little bit more hope than the other two books by Edith Wharton that I read. But anyway, so I liked Nan as the main character. She was very strong. I feel like she was one of the characters that I actually really connected with. Like, there aren't a lot of characters that I see myself in, but her, I do. Because, like, she's very imaginative. She's trying to look at the magic of the situation. She's adventurous. And, like, what really pisses me off is, though, that her sister will constantly dismiss her. When she's trying to make this out, the situation, talking about the situation as the magic of the situation, how they're in England and how it's an adventure, and looking at their, England has such history, and there's, like, talking about magic and wonder in the beauty of the world around them. And her sister just is like, why don't you just grow up and stop being so immature? And, like, it's just, I want to smack her sister. Like, there's only one time for, like, the problem is her sister is, like, every so often she defends Nan and she's kind to her sister, but then most of the time she's like, Nan, you're so annoying, or you're being so immature, or how could you do this to me, or, just so dismissive of her sister and blaming her sister and getting mad at her sister. Now, of course, some Nan's actions and choices in the book do reflect her sister, to be fair. They do reflect on her sister, unfortunately, but I would want her, I would think that her sister would be loyal to Nan, and be more considerate of Nan's feelings, but nope, she's dismissive and is like, how dare you do this to me? Like, it's all about her and not Nan. She's not thinking about her sister and her sister's struggles and her feelings and how unfair this is to her. She's just thinking about herself and how it's and it just, I could not stand her sister. She had one friend who, in amongst the group, that was actually genuinely sympathetic to her, and even gave her some, suggestions on how to handle the situation and everything, and maybe a best case scenario, a more, to make herself feel better. So she was a little kinder and more sympathetic to Nan, and was more supportive. Like, the friends, unlike her sister, were a little more understanding, a little more like, okay, I don't think this is a good idea, I don't agree with this, but here's, a solution. If your heart is set on this to do this, then here's a solution. That maybe, or, like, one of her friends was was actually looking at more of a benefit for her, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but, it wasn't necessarily, nice to be like, more like, oh, the only reason I'm supporting this is because it benefits me. But, I mean, what do you expect in this kind of society? And you could say that about the sister, too. What do you expect? But, she still was a little nicer and more understanding than her sister was, which I really appreciate that. And so, the Duke, oh my god, I could not stand the Duke. He was such a jerk to Nan and so selfish. And at first, like, his little hobby with clocks was endearing. It was cute. But then I was like, but then when Nan is talking to him about the people that live on his land, the land he owns, the land he runs, the people who are living on his land, were sick and couldn't take care of themselves. They needed food and they were poor, and like she wanted to help them and take care of them. And unfortunately, at the time she was pregnant, so at first his so I have his reason for why he got mad are a little muddled, because on the one hand I can kind of understand the fact that he wants her to not risk their child, because that's what the main goal is, to make a child and have an heir to his estate, to Tintagel. And yes, I'm talking about the Tintagel is in Arthur's castle, by the way. And like on the one hand I get that, but on the other hand it comes from a place of, this is my legacy, and I don't care about you and the fact that I'm going to be a father. All I care about is, this baby's going to represent me. This is my son. He's going to be the next in line to be the Duke. And like, that's what he cares about. He doesn't care about them at all. And they're, the only reason he's like worried and doesn't approve is not because he cares about them as his family, but as they represent me, as in, this is my heir, and if something happens to the baby inside of you, then, oh no, I don't have an heir, now I have to make another one, kind of. That's what I feel like his feelings on the situation were. But yeah, it was a risk to her health, but he wasn't doing anything. And he was like, oh, I'll let someone else do it. And then even though he expects her to do her duty, her responsibility as a wife, and as a duchess, at the same time he's like, he won't do anything. He won't do his responsibility only when he wants to do it. And then he's like, he's happily deferring everything to mommy, dearest, to mommy. I want mommy to do this for me. Like, he sends his mom to talk to, when Nan is misbehaving, he sends, I don't want to deal with it. I'm too scared to confront her or whatever. I don't want to talk to her. So you can do it, Mom. Like, on the one hand, he's all like, you're a woman, you should be doing this and this and this. But then at the same time, he's like, well, my mom ran the household, so it's all good. So, listen to her. And to me, that was so hypocritical. He's such a little whiny little bitch, and like, he's all mad, and like, he tries to put his foot down and keep her held hostage, locked up in his home, in his estate, on, in their home. But she always finds a way to get out of it, and he's such a little chicken shit. He's so afraid of her, and she's so, and it's just, I cannot stand him. And then, like, I feel so, and I mean, I love Nan. She is, like I said, not only is she so imaginative and tries to have a positive spin, and she tries to be good, like, she suppresses herself in her more spirited side to please him so that she'll look like a woman, but she just can't keep it up, and she's miserable and unhappy. And it's like, because of the pressures of society and the expectations of society, it's like, women aren't allowed to be happy, they have to be miserable. Which it's funny, it makes me think of like, I mentioned this before, that I've been watching Gilmore Girls reruns. And I just finished watching A Year in the Life for my second time. And there's a line in season 7 where, Lorelai is finally getting married, not to the guy that she's in love with, but, someone else. And she herself is trying to make the marriage work. But you can sense she's not happy, and she's struggling. And they, at one point when they come to dinner with her parents, there's, I don't know if it was then, or actually no, it wasn't then. It was actually when her mom wanted to throw a party because they eloped. So, just to not have a wedding, have to deal with the wedding and all that. And they're so her mom, being the kind of person that she is, wants to throw them a party, and it ends up turning into, oh, but you have to include wedding vows, and Lorelai doesn't want to do that, but the guy she's married to, Christopher, is like, let's have, no, I want to do wedding vows, because of course they're fighting, so when she objects to something, like, well, maybe I want to do this kind of response. And anyway, so her mom sees that there's some trouble in paradise and they're fighting, and so later that night she comes by her house and basically tells her that, yeah, marriage is about compromise, which is true. From what I've never been married, but I've seen enough marriages and have heard things from my parents, and my dad has said marriage is about compromise, so I agree with that. But then she also said, but most of the time it's about being miserable. And that's not the exact line, but basically something along those lines. And it just reminded me of in this time where it's like marriage, like, they're like, well, too bad if you're miserable, you'll just go have an affair. Although, if a woman gets caught having an affair, then that's bad. And, like, how, well, a man can sleep with whoever he wants to. He can hook up with whoever he wants to if he's not happy with his wife. But if a woman does it, God forbid. Well, yeah, in the end, having affairs and cheating is not good. I don't condone that. But the problem is that, but then it's like, it's such a, it's so hypocritical because it's because men can get away with it, but if a woman gets caught, it's like, oh no. Well, it's okay, men do it, So it's, if the Duke had an affair, if the Duke of Tintagel, if he hooked up with someone, it was like, oh, it's okay, well, that's just, guys do that, boys will be boys. Well, if she did, that's like, oh no, society is gonna judge you, and oh no, you're gonna make us look bad, you're gonna make her sister look bad, and everybody's gonna judge her and all that. And it's like, oh, so you won't judge the Duke for having an affair because that's just boys being boys. But if a woman doesn't, it's like, oh my god, it's the cardinal sin. Like, again, it's, neither one of them should do it, but it's not exactly fair that, a guy can get away with this, but a woman, if a woman does it, that's when it's like, it's seen as a bad thing. But anyway, this was really good. I have 2 more books by her. Like I said, I don't have The Custom of the Country anymore because I think I accidentally donated it. But I believe it does kind of explore similar things. It's probably a very different story, but explores a lot of the same themes. And maybe the other 2 do, but I have them, so I'm going to read them before I get rid of them. But that was The Age of Innocence. Or not The Age of Innocence. The Buccaneers. And like I said, the title refers to how the English see them as buccaneers. See these American young girls as buccaneers. So, sorry I spent so much time on that, but I could talk more about that one than, sadly, Touch Me Not, which I feel like, I wish I could talk more about Touch Me Not, but I feel, I need to learn more about the history of the Philippines. Okay, so next is, I read from this collection, Secret Window, Seeing Secret Garden, and I finally read it, yes! Because, like I said, at first, I was hesitant to read it because I was like, oh, I've seen the movie. But, you know what, I should know better, because a lot of times with adaptations are, the original story, the original material are very different. But I was thinking, oh, it's a novella, so it can't be that different, because they wouldn't need to change too much. But they did change a little bit. Like, the biggest change is the ending. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, but yeah, the endings are very different. And I do feel like, and that's probably because it's it's a movie, so it's like you have an actor performing, and they can add some color to the character and make them more likable or humorous or more, But that Mort Rainey, our main character, is a little more interesting in the movie, or at least a little more fun in the movie. But anyway, this is about Mort Rainey. He is an author, a very successful author, and his wife Amy cheated on him. So he's going through a divorce, and he's living at the lake house that they rented out, that they go to every year, and he's kind of in a very depressive state because he still loves his wife, but he's also very bitter and angry, and so he's very depressed. He's sleeping all the time, not eating a lot, and just trying to write, but he can't. He's very much struggling. He basically has writer's block right now, and he's very much struggling because he's still thinking about his wife and the divorce and everything, his ex-wife. And one day, this man, John Shooter from Mississippi, shows up and accuses him of plagiarizing his work. And Mort doesn't like this. He doesn't like being accused of something he is sure that he's never done before. And he's like, I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to show you the magazine where the story is published and show you the date. And because, of course, he recalls, and John Shooter tells him, okay, fine. Well, I'm going to give you 3 days. It's for you to get this magazine to show me and prove if I'm right or wrong. And while he's gone, like, he is a haunting figure in Mort's life these 3 days, and like a lot of shit happens. There's people get killed, and and just his house is damaged. His pet cat gets killed. Although now that's one of the changes in the adaptations. It's a dog, and I'm wondering if maybe the people who created the movie. I mean, I think they kind of explained it in the making of featurette on the DVD that I think that people are, because like, not dogs, I feel like, are just a little bit more popular than cats. Like, the universal population there's a lot more dog people, which is sad, because I do love cats. Unfortunately, I can't have a cat. And cats are just as adorable. But I don't know, I think people just feel like a lot of people generally just connect more with dogs. And now this is just my opinion. If you're a cat person watching my channel, please, I'm not trying to, diss cats or anything, and maybe I'm wrong here, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who love cats. I have 2 friends who have cats and dogs. And like I said, I love cats too. I just can't own one because I have family members that are allergic, including my brother-in-law. So possibly my nephews or my niece might be allergic. So I can never have them over if I had a cat. So, and yeah, most of my family aren't cat people. Anyway, even if no one was allergic, I think a lot of people don't like, even though cats like my dad, but I think most animals like my dad. Most non-wild animals like my dad. And, so yeah, that's just my theory about that, why they changed it to a dog in the movie adaptation. But anyway, so this was pretty good. This was good. I'm glad I finally read it. And there are enough differences that I was still able to, enjoy it. And I mean, it had been a while since I watched the movie, so that helped too. Because if I had watched the movie recently, then I wouldn't have been as motivated to read the novella. Mort is really cranky and, angry, and he's not the most likable guy. Like, he's, like I said, Johnny Depp makes him a lot more likable and charming. And there, of course, are improvised lines in the adaptation. Which I would love to know what Stephen King thought about that adaptation, because I know he doesn't always love. Of course, he famously was not happy with Stanley Kubrick's movie, his adaptation of The Shining. Although I think he's come around. And I think he also knows that when he does an adaptation of his books, it's not that great. I think, from what I hear. But although, I feel like Rose Red, which was not based on a book. I mean, there was a book to go with it. There was the Diary of Ellen Rimbauer, who was the main ghost in Rose Red. But there's no Rose Red book. So maybe that helped. That probably helped why that one was good. But anyway, we're getting off track here. So I definitely, like, we're really dealing with the fact more is, like, we're exploring responding to divorce and how your life can be great and everything, but then all of a sudden you had the rug pulled out from under you because he wasn't aware. And it is partly his fault, because not that her choice, not that she, like, not that she was right to choose, to respond by cheating on him. Yeah, that was definitely not morally right. That was not right, but I don't like that. But you find out from Amy that Mort was never really there mentally, and like, he was very much focused on his work, his books, which Stephen King does talk about that whenever he writes a lot of books where the main characters are writers. Even in It, that little bit of seeing Bill and Audra's relationship, like, Bill Denroth was more focused on his work, and Audra felt neglected. And then, of course, in his case, there was a little more going on than just that. Like, there was less repressed memories that he was haunted by that he didn't realize. So it wasn't just his work, but still, like, King does explore that theme a lot in his books. And I'm wondering if maybe he fears he's doing that. He worries about doing that, like, getting so caught up in the story that he, is never there. Of course, like, I don't know. It's not, authors won't necessarily write about what, so I don't know, like, if maybe he does relate to, relate to that or not. But he does know about writing books. He's a writer himself. And, we also get, we also see, and he, Mort has to starts to acknowledge that, and starts to realize that maybe he played a part in her choosing to cheat. Like, or at least played a part in their marriage falling apart. Like, he didn't, force her hand to cheat. Like, she didn't have to do that. But she felt unloved and felt like she was getting attention, so she gets it from somewhere else. So yeah, it's not the best approach, and she shouldn't have done that, but what else was she gonna do? And of course, people that have been cheated on that are reading this probably wouldn't matter to them, because cheating to them, it still hurts and isn't right that this person made that choice, that she makes that choice. And I do have a theory that maybe King was paralleling his failed marriage to the accusations of cheating, and plagiarizing as a form. It's like a form of cheating, and like stealing someone else's story, and like someone stole his wife, and maybe because he's dealing with this, his old fears of people accusing him of plagiarizing, and that, because you do find out that in college he did plagiarize someone's story, and his guilty feelings about that, about stealing, about taking credit for someone else's work, and that comes up, that become, he's reminded of that. Also, like, I really liked how him and Amy were still very close. And there was still kind of a little bit of love between them. Like, she's still worried about him, and he still saw her nagging him. And it's funny because I feel like when you're not looking in person of pause, like, sometimes their quirks and their traits, like, when, like, can seem endearing, or like you roll your eyes at it, but then because now he sees her in this even more negative light, the fact that she cheated on him, basically betrayed him, and all of a sudden that kind of stuff is seen as more than just annoying. And but the way they speak to each other, because she calls him on the phone a couple times, and you can still feel that there's a little bit of a bond between them, as a, because they were married and everything, reflected there. And also there's a scene where twice he comes back to where his old house, and has interacts with Amy and her new boyfriend, the guy, and you can tell there's still, like I said, a connection between the two of them, they still have their relationship, and he will always be in the background of her life. And Ted, the guy that she's with, who she cheated on Mort with, he will always have to deal with that shadow of Mort always being a part of her life. And also, now as for John Juder, I really liked him. He was very intimidating, and he was one of those antagonists where he can put on the charm, the southern charm, and seem like he's friendly at first glance, but then there's this sense of he could snap and hurt someone you love, or hurt you if you're not careful. Like, there's this tension in his body language and how he interacts with Mort, where what comes out of his mouth is friendly and but then you can see it in his eyes that he could, harm Mort, or harm his loved ones, or his friends. So I think he was good, which I think John Turturro, I think that's how you say it, he's the actor played John Juder, and I really liked him. Like I said, the only big difference was the ending that they chose to do in the movie, which still pays homage to the novella ending in a way. But I almost kind of prefer that ending, and I prefer how it was executed over how it's done in the book. But like I said, I'm curious about what Stephen King himself thinks about that adaptation, because I know he does. Like I said, I know he doesn't always love the adaptations. I would love to, there should, on Miss Mojo, they should do a top 10 endings that Stephen King has strong feelings on. Like the ones that he likes, the ones he doesn't like. I mean, I don't know if there ever was any video like that, but they should do that. I'd love to see a video, or at least like something where they talk about that, of what books he likes and doesn't like, and what adaptations he liked and doesn't like of his books. But anyway, so there's that. And I don't know what I want to read. I think I might read The Library Policeman, since I recently saw Mike from Mike's book reviews talking about that, filming his review on that one. So the last book I was able to finish was Robert Stone's Damascus Gate, and this is definitely a little relevant to today. I mean, it was set in the 90s, so it's what was going on in Jerusalem in the 90s. But you have our main character, Christopher Lucas. He is an American journalist who wants to write about religious fanaticism in Jerusalem, as he calls it, the Jerusalem Syndrome. And he's working with this Dr. Oberman. And he crosses paths with this beautiful black singer who is Jewish, named Sonia. And she's part of this group of people that are very, they're a group of religious, again, fanatics. And they are basically give off cult vibes. And Chris doesn't really, he's stopped, even though I think he was born Jewish, but I think he became Catholic later in life, but now he has trouble believing. And, or at least he doesn't believe what's going on in here. And he kind of, Sonia wants to convert him to their side of things to prove to him he has a reason to believe. And he's like, nope, I'm sorry, I have a hard time believing this. This is a cult. It's crazy. You need to get away from them. And they're led by this Janice Zimmer, Mr. DeCuff, I don't remember his first name, and this Raziel, who was a friend of Sonya's, who used to have drug problems, and he might be doing drugs again, so he can get closer to God in his state of being high. And well, their group, they and other groups, the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians are at war with each other in Jerusalem. And Chris is just trying to, get his book because he's hoping to write a book with Dr. Oberman and trying to understand these different groups. But it's not a safe place to be, and especially at night. And there might possibly, one of these groups might be planting a bomb to make their point. So, like I said, so obviously this book deals very much with what was going on in Jerusalem in the 90s and these different groups, religious groups, fighting for power and thinking that they are the right group, that they are the ones that are in the right, and the other groups should be eradicated. They're not important. They should, be killed or gotten rid of or enslaved or whatever. And so you kind of see the really bad side mostly of religion, I feel like, but then you also see the good side of religion, that people just have faith and want to believe in something, and that their struggles, and that they felt like God healed them from their past and the bad things that happened to them, like getting involved in drugs and stuff like that, and trying, finding their faith. And that's what Sonya is all about. She has found her faith. She has such strong beliefs. And, I could tell Christopher, he trying to convince her to get away from this group of people was just a waste of time. She was so far gone into this group, which clearly was a cult. Very much cult vibes to me. And, he was just and he was not going to get her out of there. And I feel like it's very hard. It takes a lot to convince someone to believe. Also, she was not going to do well either, trying to convince him and giving him faith and stuff. I did really like her character. She was strong, she was tough, but she was beautiful, and she just wanted to have faith in something. And, her struggle was that people did not, like I said, she was Jewish, but the Jewish people did not see her as Jewish. They thought she was a fraud, and she didn't deserve to be considered Jewish. And she does, at one point in the last part of the book, she does get herself put in a lot of danger where these people are going to kill her because they're like, you're not one of us, you're not Jewish. So, anyway, I also, I liked Christopher, he was interesting, his struggle with, with his own faith, and he just stopped believing, and he just wanted to write this book and understand these different groups. And, he was a journalist, so he would do what it took to get the information he needed, even if it was putting his life in danger. And there's at one point where something really bad happens, and he's wandering around, and he ends up in the desert, and this helicopter shows up. I don't know if they were Brits or Americans, but they show up, they see him, he flags them down, and then they're like, actually, we're gonna come and get you in the morning. And I never really understood that moment, why they left him and couldn't get him, because if they're worried about people coming out and trying to shoot at them or something, they could have, got out of there quickly, at least attempted to get him out of there, and then if someone came, then they could be like, sorry, we'll get you later. Yeah, they could have done that, but they just kind of left him. They didn't even try to help him out. At least I don't think so. But anyway, so we also have Zimmer. I didn't trust him. I from the start, I didn't trust him. I was weary of him. Raziel's an idiot. I felt bad for him that he's so addicted, and he seemed like, we do meet his mother eventually, and she's like, he was a good boy, and you feel so bad for his mom. And he was just an innocent kid who gets caught up in all this religiosity and just and drugs and all that, and I do feel bad for him. Ducouf was not really, he was this old man. He was, like, I think he was a threat, but in more of a mild way. Like, he wasn't necessarily dangerous. Like, Zimmer, I think, was more of a threat than Ducouf was. Even though he was the one that was considered the Rev. There were a few other women, like Helen Henderson. She was considered the Rose of Saskatoon. And so I have a little petty issue with, because the author kept referring to her as the Rose. He didn't use her name. And maybe that was because, it was just like, he was immersing you in the world and stuff. So to the cult, she was seen as the Rose. So she didn't have a name. So maybe there's a point to it. But it just annoyed me hearing her, like, they would never refer to her name, maybe every once in a while, but most of the time she was always called the Rose. The Rose said this, the Rose that. And I don't know, reading that every time kind of irritated me, because it was like I had to remember to say the Rose instead of just Rose, because Rose is a name. It can be used as a name. So I kept having to. So it was kind of a silly little petty issue that I had. So not a big problem or anything. It's just, for me personally, I was kind of annoyed having to read the Rose every time and just been like, okay, she has a name. You gave her a name, so call her by her name. So it was just more of a little petty thing. But yeah, she was okay. There was not, and then we had two other female. Linda Erickson, I did not trust her. I was very wary of her, which I don't think you're supposed to trust her. And she ended up proving to be a coward, I feel like. And then the other female character whose name I knew before, but now I can't remember it. She was this other female character. She was interesting. Like, she was very snippy and, angry person, kind of, but very passionate and really cared about the situation and, like, wanted to fight because she believed they had a good cause to fight for. They were doing the right thing and they had this good cause, everything. And she just cared about her faith and the people and wanting justice. But there were times she could be a bit bitchy and rude, especially to Christopher. And of course, she had that mentality of, oh, stupid Americans, or Americans are selfish or don't care. And that, as I gotta admit, as an American, I was like, well, no, not all Americans are like that. So in my real life, I always try to be, when I have traveled to other countries, I always try to be respectful. And of course, when I travel to other countries, in the past, I've been with my parents, so I don't have too much interaction with people. But yeah, I was in the back of my mind, I was thinking, okay, I gotta be respectful and trying to put in the effort to respect their country and everything, and I don't want to come off as a rude, obnoxious Americans, because they already think bad. A lot of other countries already think badly of us. Of course, there are justifiable reasons. There are justifiable reasons, but we're not getting to that. I don't want to get into that. I'm just bringing it up because it was kind of annoying whenever she was, like, giving Christopher a hard time and being judgmental of him. And of course, he was exposing the religious groups. He was going to write a book about it, so I guess you can't entirely blame her for being protective. And there were a lot of groups that would, wanted him. There are a lot of people didn't want him to write the book, but there were other people that wanted him to write it because they were like, you can make us look good, show our good side, and, prove that we're the good guys here. And of course, they believe it. They believe that they are the good guys. So if you're interested in this, like I said, it's kind of relevant to what was going on in starting in 2023. But of course, some people might not be able to read this kind of stuff just yet. Because of that, there might be people that can read, that will want to read, and there are people that might not want to read it. But anyway, so yeah, I thought this was really good. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed this book. So those are the books I read, and I'm currently trying to finish An Echo of Things to Come. I am very close to finishing it, so I'm going to read a lot today. Which I really wanted to, which I'm wondering, like, who the people, who's who on the cover, on this cover. I've never really looked at the cover before, at the people, but I don't know who's who. I'm trying to think, I mean, there's only one girl and one woman on the cover, so this must be Asha. Although this is not how I pictured. Like, they look more like Lord of the Rings characters or like Wheel of Time characters on this cover. Not what I pictured. But, I'm guessing because she's the only girl, main female lead. So I'm guessing maybe this is Asha. The one girl on the cover. But, I would love to ask the author, like, I mean, although, you know, they don't always have a say in their covers. But I do like his covers. But anyway, so this one picks up where the last one left off, and there's a lot, like, you know, a lot of characters, each of the characters is in very different positions in the story, and they have to make a lot of choices, and there's a lot of discussion on, you know, what is right, what's the right decision on how to handle things, and how, like, everything has shades of gray, and that, you know, some people may be afraid of certain things, but then it's like some people might like, this is what's necessary, but at the expense, but it's like at the expense of other people that are innocent. And it looks at like how certain power can be dangerous. And it's like one of these things where it's kind of difficult to break the cycle of fear, but someone has to do it. And, you know, someone has to start putting people in the right direction and motivating people not by fear, but by wanting to fight back. You know, I mean, yes, there's still fear involved. There is still fear. It's still a good motivator, but don't let it consume you. Don't let it dominate how you feel about certain things and certain people. And that everybody has shades of gray. Not everybody is purely good. And that you can't judge people by, you know, by the past or one person. And I really appreciate that Asha continues to play a bigger role in the story. She's not just the love interest for Davian. I like that. I really appreciate that she's gonna have to take some action. She has to fight, and she might have to make some sacrifices. I really appreciate that. But, and I also like, you know, that Wirt is someone that takes his responsibility seriously. And, like, well, I think all these characters take their responsibilities really seriously and aren't just sitting there being, like, whiny and be like, I don't want to do this. It's so hard. You know, this is so scary. It's like, I understand that it would be hard and scary and a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility, and you just want to be a kid or just want to, you know, be whatever, or just be a regular person. But, you know, considering the situation they're in a lot of these fantasy books, like Wheel of Time, for instance, you know, it's like, yeah, these characters, you know, yeah, it's not fun and it's scary and you're very young and you deserve to have, you know, your freedom and stuff, but there is a lot of shit going down and more important things than your problems. There is a bigger conflict that you have to deal with, and unfortunately, yeah, the weight is on you. So I really like that these Asha and Kaden and were and Davian are taking it seriously. I'm like, yeah, I don't love this, but you know what? I have to do it. I have to do what I have to do. You know, the sacrifices I have to make to protect our homeland. But anyway, so yeah, this is really good. So I'm very happy with how this second book has gone. I'm almost done with it. I did get some books, which I did recently get some books, add 2 more books to my Kindle. I got Ninth Rain. I can't remember the author's name. I actually meant to grab it before I started filming. Which I've heard a lot of talk from Elliot Brooks. She's talked about that a lot and how great it is, and it's one of her favorites. I've been meaning to read, so I finally got it on Kindle because I have not seen it at Books A Million. So I finally bought it, and you know, it's off of Kindle, but I got the Kindle. I don't have a physical copy. And then I also got Stoner by John Williams, which I've heard a lot, as it's a really good classic and good for dark academia. So I don't know, I might save it for October, for autumn to read it. I don't know. I might read it now and just read it again in autumn if I really enjoy it. But anyway, so I don't know when I'll start those, but anyway, I got those off Kindle. So I'm gonna finish this book once I'm done filming, and then I will upload this video for you guys. So by the time you guys see this video, hopefully I'll be done if I don't get sidetracked by anything else. But anyway, I hope you guys had a good reading month in January. I would love to hear in the comments below what you read in January. And maybe what was your favorite? I don't know what my favorite was. I think it was a tie between Damascus Gate and Touch Me Not. That's what I've been saying in videos, commenting when people, booktubers ask what was your favorite read. So if you guys like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, click subscribe if you haven't already, click the bell notification button below if you want to be notified about my latest videos. And I hope you are having a good start to a new month today, as it is February 1st. And I will talk to you all later. Alright, bye!